morning. Welcome to Gateway Online. I'm Michelle Mercer, the pastor of Gateway Community Church, and it's great to be with you this morning. We are excited to continue our journey with this series called Good Questions. And today I'm excited to have someone who's from Niagara-on-the-Lake, who you may know locally. And we are excited to have Pastor Rudy Dirks with us today. Rudy is a life coach, a legacy coach, and he's going to talk to us a little bit about his journey of faith as well as the impact of legacy coaching. Welcome, Rudy. It's great to have you.
Thank you. It's great to be here. Thanks, Michelle.
Tell us a little bit about yourself for those who are new or maybe not from Niagara. Just tell us a little bit about your faith journey.
Okay. I was born in St. Catharines, so in Niagara-on-the-Lake is where home is for me. When I was 5, my parents took our family to Congo as missionaries, and so really identify in terms of my growing up years, and my home country really was Congo, which was Zaire for a while, and now is Congo DRC again. So I grew up there as a missionary child with all of the adventures that we as kids enjoyed in Congo and in our life there. And that was really, even right now for my journey right now, that started with that experience of growing up in another culture and seeing, which was a lot of suffering, poverty, that kind of thing that I experienced in my childhood years. So when I was in high school, my sense of call, my dream was to become a doctor, come back to Congo and to Africa and serve the people in terms of being a medical doctor. And that journey took me back to Canada in my university years, went to Western, did my undergrad there. I didn't become a doctor. For many years I tried and applied and did not become a doctor, and that's a whole other story. But what happened during those years was my sense was that God was changing my call, or maybe clarifying my call for me, that it was not healing in a medical or physical sense that God was calling me to, but healing, more of an integration of healing emotionally, spiritually in people's lives. And so that took me on to doing some graduate studies in counseling psychology and also theology. And by that time, Sharon and I were married and we were having our children. So what happened after that is I went to Toronto and I taught counseling and psychology for about 9 years at what is now Tyndale. And we went to Botswana for about 7 years after that. So that was another piece of my call going back to Africa, a different part of Africa. Our kids then spent much of their childhood growing up in Africa and Botswana, which was very significant for them as well, and for me. I wanted them to have that experience. We came back from that season and pastored here in Niagara-on-the-Lake for about 13 years, which is what probably a lot of people, if they know me, that's the context they would know me. But during that time, I had a sense of call of working within Christian institutions, Bible college, mission, church, and it was good, and God's just taught me so many things. I've always had a yearning for integrating faith and life in a non-Christian, non-institutional setting. Mm-hmm. And so that was the sense 5 years ago where we stepped out of our pastoral work here, we blessed the church and felt blessed in leaving. And then I started the business that I'm doing right now, which is Integrate Legacy Coaching, transition coaching. So it feels, these last 5 years, it feels like there's sort of been a convergence of the things that God has, the various streams that God has worked in my life, bringing them to a convergence in what I'm doing right now.
I find that really encouraging, Rudy, to hear about how you're still learning and unpacking all those pieces of your calling that were first birthed like long ago, and they don't look the same as you thought they maybe would.
Yeah, exactly.
Tell us a little bit about what it was like to be able to transition from even doing ministry into this kind of role, just in the last little bit.
Yeah, it's a good question. When I was doing ministry, one of the things I would tell people a lot in sermons and in pastoral care was they have a unique place in wherever God has placed them, whether it's in the home or in school or profession or their work setting. There are places as a pastor I can't go, that's where they are, and so that God's doing something in His kingdom there, and just encouraging people to look for what God was calling them to in kingdom work. I don't like the distinction between ministry and non-ministry, and I know your heart is there as well, that God is everywhere, God is doing things everywhere. And so what I was excited about in making the transition out of pastoral role and out of a pastoral kind of identity was exactly that, being able to do something which has been in my heart for a long time, and that is going into the marketplace, into the workplace, into the world. And I had to have something to bring in terms of some skill or something that would, in terms of work connection or a vocation, but to see what God is doing in people's lives, in their professions, in their businesses, in corporations, in management teams, whatever that might look like. So that was the transition for me.
So I love the idea of not having professionalizing ministry too much. It's about the kingdom, isn't it?
Yeah,
so there's so many people. I just spent a weekend with pastors, which was wonderful in affirming their calling and be able to walk with them. But just as excited about those who are in the everyday careers and in the marketplace and who are fulfilling a mission that God's placed in their heart as well.
Yeah.
You talk about life coaching, and we've talked about that in our series, but legacy coaching, explain the difference. Why is it called legacy coaching?
Legacy coaching, and really what I tend to tell people when they ask me kind of what I do is transition coaching is what I usually phrase it as. And what I have in mind there is, and this comes out of, I guess, the decades of counseling experience. I was practicing marriage and family counseling and therapy in Toronto for the years that I was teaching as well. So in the experience of counseling and working with students and teaching and pastoring and mission work overseas, I think the bottom line conviction for me is every single one of us is living out a journey and a narrative and a story in our own life. That's God's brought us somewhere. We understand from Psalm 139, God's called us from before, He's known us from before the foundations of the earth. He's known us from before we were created. And so there's a sense in which there's the big narrative of what God does, and then each of us are living out our own life story. So legacy, transition, coaching, really it's a way of helping us to discover what God is doing in our lives. And I sometimes kind of playfully, I guess, look at it as an Easter egg hunt when I'm working with people, and that is, where are the Easter eggs in people's lives? Where is God doing something? And it doesn't matter whether a person is a Christian. It doesn't matter. The issue isn't whether they're a Christian or not. God is doing something in all of our lives. And we are all on some spectrum of awareness of that and openness to that or not. And so even working with people in terms of spiritual awareness, even if they're not professing Christians, is still potentially a place where they can begin to discover there's something in their life that is beyond themselves, that where the places where they get stuck, there's something they can't do on their own. So that's part of that journey, and that the issue of the idea of legacy really is we live out a journey, we live out a legacy, we leave something, and we're leaving it all the way along as we have relationships with people, interact, influence them, and really helping people to come to that awareness is what I see my role in doing.
We talk about as believers that we want one day for when we get to heaven for the Lord to say, "Well done, good and faithful servant." Yeah. But there's also markers here that we want to see that we're fulfilling what God's called us to do, and leaving a legacy for others, one that is sure in faith. Talk to me a little bit about retiring and the transition stage of going from working full time and rearing your kids, working full time, all those pieces, and then people transitioning from that stage into retirement. As a pastor, I've seen this happen more than once, where people get lost for a season because of the fact that they don't understand who they are outside of their workplace. So talk to me a little bit about helping people through that season.
I think a lot of that has to do with the realization, this does come from developmental psychology, a lot is life stage development. And we recognize children's development and life stages. We often kind of freeze frame once we get into adulthood, and it's like, well, you just become more of an adult. You just kind of do it, right? Sure. And there's been some good research and stuff that's been done over the years on adult life stages and recognizing young adult life stages, early young adult, late young adult, middle age, and then later stages. And each of those have unique tasks and they have unique challenges. And there's transitions as you transition from one life stage to another. So in that big framework, when we approach, whether it's our 50s, 60s, 70s, whatever, somewhere in that range, when we approach the life stages of, or the life stage of completing perhaps a vocation or a career, what used to be called retirement, which now is rapidly changing, and that's not retirement anymore. And there's an increasing recognition that there's very significant, in some cases, some of the most significant life stage is left after the age of 70. Some of the great composers and artists did their best work when they were in their 80s, you know. So if you look at it in terms of creativity and maturity and all of those aspects, that transition from working in areas either because I have to or it's something I've been good at, maybe it's something I've identified with. I am a pastor, or I am a doctor, or I am a businessman, and our identity gets kind of truncated into that area because we do that well. So one of the things I find in working with people is they become successful in some area, and that's awesome and that's wonderful, but they become so successful in that area that they keep pursuing their success. And the areas of life that are left neglected or unattended to are the ones that come into the fore later on in life, like relationships with our children and grandchildren, and what kind of impact have we had on people in the world, and who am I if I end my career, and then who am I, and how do I identify? So those are the big transition issues, some of them, for that I work with people on.
Mm-hmm. So walk us through it a little bit. What if someone comes to you, they know they're retiring September 2022, and there's a lot of anxiety, there's a lot of fear of what's next. Yeah. Where would you start with them in a coaching situation?
Yeah, that's a good question. And it depends on where the person is, because one of the things I always do, I always start off with a discovery session. And if someone calls me up and asks me to work, my first question is, well, let's sit down, let's talk about where you're at, what's going on for you, what are the questions, what are the issues, where's the pain, what's precipitating this question, you know, that you want to talk about. So it just varies right across the board, from people who are in crisis, and that's where we start with, to people who have a sense of adventure and they're just looking forward to the next thing that they want to do. So it depends very much where people are at. Decades ago, Erik Erikson talked about the 8 stages of a person's life, and the last stage is integrity versus despair. And so what he reflects on that is when we get into later life, we do a lot of reflecting, because there's less life ahead of us and more life behind us, and so we do a lot of reflecting. And sometimes that can involve reflections of regret, or I wish I hadn't done this or had done something else. Sometimes it's gratitude, and that makes the difference between whether a person in their later years experiences despair, if there's things that feel like they're undone, or there's a lot of regret, or integrity, where things pull together and it feels like there's a sense of wholeness in life, that things have been done well. And it doesn't mean people aren't making mistakes, but even the mistakes have been navigated or whatever. So that's a key place. You know, the idea of finishing well is what we all want to do, is finish well. And what does that look like? And so that's a key focus for transitioning at this stage in life. I say at this stage because I'm 65 this year, so I'm living out what I'm doing with other people as well.
Sure. And that can be helpful at times when you're asking questions. You're like, that's a good question. I should ask myself that question.
Exactly.
That's great.
Yeah.
And journeying with people, that's really where a lot of that joy comes in. Yeah. As leaders and as people who care about people's spiritual well-being and the holistic approach. Yeah. I love that, Rudy. I love knowing that for many, like the best is yet to come for them too. When it comes to this self-awareness, that there's reasons why there are presidents that are in their 70s, and there are people who are staying longer in their places of employment because that's when they're starting to reach a level of real awareness about who they are and what they have to offer, let alone life experience. Yeah,
exactly. And that's such a strong theme, especially in the Old Testament, the themes of wisdom and the themes, gray hair, wisdom, whatever, elder, as people get older, they are walking a pathway of wisdom, hopefully. The Proverbs talks a lot about that. And that's very central to what I'm looking for in working with people, is looking for the wisdom that God may be wanting to bring into their lives. And my constant prayer every single time I meet with someone is for God to give me wisdom to discern what's important in this particular person's life, in this conversation that we're having right now. So many, many times, I'm not sure when I start a session exactly where it's going to end up and what's supposed to happen. There's a framework we may be working towards. Maybe there's necessary conversations that I'm working with right recently I'm working with someone who's in the US and a big company. This man, started off with nothing and he's got this huge company and he's got a number of kids, and the question of what involvement they will have when he's done and how they will transition from the first generation to the next generation. And so one of the key pieces here is necessary conversations. What are the conversations that you need to have with your children that you haven't had yet? And then so that's sort of a framework, but then the question is, how do people respond to those conversations, and how can I facilitate them in a way that's going to be most life-giving for both generations in this transition?
And so if you're meeting with someone, is it just practicality point of view? Do you tend to meet with them for a set number of times, like 6, 8, 12? Or do some of these people, are you walking with them for many years?
Yeah, that's a good question. And my business is evolving over the past 5 years. I started out much more like what I was used to in counseling practice, where I'd book a session and see how many sessions a person would want. But as things have been developing, and there's been a real opening for especially family businesses and working with entire family units, that becomes a much bigger issue in terms of a much bigger job in terms of packages. So when we look at 3 months, a package of 3 months that includes conversations with the first generation as a couple, with the second generation, and also as couples in this, so then it becomes much more complex. But on an individual basis, what I would say right now is if an individual, someone in their vocation, career, whatever, is asking these kinds of questions, what I will generally do is do the discovery meeting and then propose, usually it's a minimum of 10 sessions. I say, okay, well let's work on this for 10 sessions over a period of months, whatever, and this is what we can, they identify the goals, this is what they're trying to accomplish, the things that they're trying to resolve, and then rather than doing it session by session, saying, well, this is what we're trying to accomplish. So that's our marker point. The marker point is not whether this is 2 sessions or 5. The marker point is, have we accomplished what you're trying to get to?
It's the difference between coaching and maybe some other types of training is that it's not the content that's important. It's helping people pull through the journey together.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I feel God has given me in terms of the sweet spot that I like. There's a lot of good books and materials and all kinds of things people can look at, and I will often refer people to that. What I feel that what God has gifted me with is processing things with people, processing their life, processing the questions, and that's something you can't put in a book. You can't, that kind of. So I really enjoy doing that. It's what is it, Eric Little's, when I run, I feel God's pleasure. It's that kind of idea where this piece that I'm working at right now, I feel God's pleasure in being able to do this. And on a selfish level, I don't have to worry about institutions. There aren't boards or councils or constituents or whatever. It's like, no, I'm doing this and focusing on a client or a family or a management team in a business, and I get to put all my attention there on that.
That's right.
And gives me a lot of freedom.
And be really present in the moment, right? With that
Yeah.
client and with that family or that business or whatever that looks like.
Yeah, exactly.
You touched a little bit on wisdom and finding wisdom and helping people. I don't want to put you on the spot, but do you have a few key thoughts of wisdom for our congregation and those who are watching today? Just if they are going through a transition in life, a different life stage. I mean, we talk about our mission of the church is to reach people in all ages and stages of their faith journey. And so we want to help people, even just now, to use the wisdom God's given them to be able to move forward in their faith, even to get the courage to step to whatever's next.
Yeah.
Would you have a few thoughts on that you could share, or a few pieces of advice or wisdom?
You know what? I would say stop, look, and listen. Because what we do is we're caught up in the busyness of life and the stresses of things and trying to solve problems or enjoying what we're doing and just, focusing on the successes or whatever it is that we do. And it's all, not all good, but probably most of it is good and necessary. And I would say in terms of some maybe tips for people is if we can stop. And so the idea there really is trying to recapture, regain, rediscover Sabbath and Sabbath rest. Yeah. And I think that is the most significant, or at least one of the most significant pieces. I mean, God's built it into creation. He's built it into, every seventh day or whatever. And I don't know what people's practices are, but I know it's very easy to forget that. And Sharon and I went on a sabbatical a number of years ago, and without going into all the story of that, that was very, very transformative for both of us. And a lot of that had to do, we spent some time in some monastic communities, a monastery in New Mexico called Christ in the Desert, and then we also were in one in Arkansas called Little Portion Hermitage, and we spent a number of months in each, weeks in one and months in another, and to center our lives around the Benedictine model of ora et labora, which is prayer and then work. Whereas my pattern typically was you work and then you pray around that because God needs to bless it. But what we were challenged with there is to actually center our lives around prayer. 7 times, as the psalmist says, 7 times a day I pray. And in the monastic community, they use that as the pattern for coming to the chapel to pray in the middle of the night, early morning, all day long. And so we developed a routine around that, which is very different for us. But it really anchored something in our souls and spirits of that stop, just stop, pause, and then look and listen has to do with listening to God. When I stop and I actually set aside a sacred space in my life, time, geographical space, silent space. For me right now, it's walking through the forest along the lake, which I do virtually every day. And just walking there, and then sometimes it's at home and in listening prayer or contemplative prayer or abiding prayer. Prayer where we're not talking. Talking prayer is good, but the prayer where we're not talking it's a opportunity for me to listen to God and let the Spirit begin. It's Psalm 46:10, right? Be still and know that I am God, and just let God begin to move into the spaces in my life. And so I would say that would be probably, anyone can do that. You don't need me for that.
It's true, but it's such a good reminder to us, though, especially in evangelical circles. We're not very good at the whole stop and look and listen.
Yeah, I know.
We could do and keep moving, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Keep things going.
And even outside of the kind of Christian circles, one of the things that, meditation and mindfulness and all of those things you see them all over in kind of popular literature. I mean, that reflects a hunger that we have for something deeper than just actively engaging and talking and doing and busyness, but there's a deeper longing there that I think is really crucial. So I think that's a key part in terms of life. And the amazing thing is, when we move into later stages of life, there's actually opportunity for that. The very thing that people are afraid of the most, which is if I'm not doing what I do in my profession, if I'm not doing my job and I'm stopping that, it terrifies me, because what am I going to do? I'm going to be at home just with my spouse. Well, might be good for a while, but I don't have anything to do. So typically the questions in this transition of life are questions of, what meaning do I have? What purpose do I have? Why am I doing what I'm doing? Am I of use to anyone? Those are the questions we begin to ask. And so really what's happening is we're being given a Sabbath season in life where we can begin to reflect on things that maybe we haven't reflected on a lot before. Yeah. So another piece on this one, as I would say, is for young adults who sometimes have, in fact, fairly often I'll have young adults saying, can you do something in my season of life, not just for 50 and 60-year-olds, but 20 and 30-year-olds. And one of the pieces there is, I would say, begin to cultivate a Sabbath heart. Because when you begin to cultivate those spaces where you connect with God, you will be so much more equipped when you get to 50, 60, 70,
Yeah, it's not such a hard stop and restart. There's some practices that are being developed that will help transform you over the years and sustain you in those quieter seasons. I was just thinking about how perhaps the stop that happened during COVID is the reason why we've gone into this season they called the Great Resignation, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Because people actually had some time to stop and reflect on why they're doing what they're doing, what they want out of life. But let's not forget that practice can be taken with us, that quieting ourselves and thinning out the things that keep us busy for that Sabbath rest. Rudy, it's been just a pleasure listening to you and talking with you about legacy coaching. And I'm excited because there's so much potential for people in every stage to be able to just go a little deeper in understanding who they are, but understanding God's purposes for their life.
Yeah, exactly.
You're a man of faith. You are a person of integrity, which your reputation goes before you. I knew of your reputation before I knew you, Rudy. You and your wife. And so would you be able to just pray for those who are listening today? Just close us in a word of prayer, just the people who may be struggling or needing hope.
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you.
Heavenly Father, I thank you for this conversation. Thank you for your work in every one of our lives. And whoever might be listening to this, whenever they are and wherever they are, you are intricately and intimately involved in that person's life, in their heart, in who they are, who they've become, and you go before them, behind them, above and below and beside them. And so I pray that even as we have these kinds of conversation, as Michelle talks to others as well, that you would bring wisdom and discernment for people who are asking questions about what to do in their life and how to handle situations. I pray that you would bring the people into their lives, the community that they need, that would help them. I pray that you would, most importantly, that you would bring the gentle, loving presence of who you are into each one of us, as we've been created in your image and created to belong to you. I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. So one more piece I wanted to mention, and you may or may not find a place to put this in. One of the things that's really exciting for me and what I'm doing with the coaching is it's kind of full circle back to, I graduated in 1975 in Congo from high school. And one of the dreams was to go back to Africa, which I did in Botswana with our family. But more recently, in the last, it's been about 3 years now, I've reconnected with a missionary colleague of mine who was a missionary kid at the time. And so we're doing some leadership training and leadership coaching in Congo and Angola with some of the leaders there. There's virtually no resources like that. So we're doing that, and I go there once. I was in October, and once a year I go there to do a leadership retreat with these leaders. Some of them are church leaders, some of them are leaders in the community. And so it's just a piece that for me is really significant. It's coming full circle on that.
That's great. It's wonderful. God puts those pieces together.
Yeah.
Just to show his pleasure with the work that we're doing, and because he cares about the kingdom. Could people be a part of that, if any way? If people want to contribute to that, is there ways they could donate or be a part of it?
Yeah, they could. I guess I would say they probably should contact me if they wanted to do that, or be part of that. That would be awesome. Yeah.
That's great. Good.
Thank you.
Well, if you'd like to continue your journey in coaching or exploring the option of coaching or legacy coaching, you can find Rudy's website at the end of this segment. But if you'd like to just connect with someone, if you'd like someone to pray with you or walk with you on your faith journey, would you text the word connect to the number below? We would love to be a part of your faith journey and what God is doing in your life. And if you'd like to make a donation, we appreciate your generosity and we thank you for your gifts in advance. You can do that by visiting our website, gatewaynotl.com. Thank you so much, Rudy, for being with us.
Yes, absolutely.
We appreciate everything that you are doing for our community and your love for your neighbors. And thank you for pouring into our hearts today.
Thank you very much, Michelle. Thanks for inviting me. God bless you guys.
God bless you. We hope you have a great day.